I've known for many years about Raphael Lemkin. I don't know how many people in this room know about him. He's the person who coined the term genocide. 49 members of his family died in Treblinka. And also, I should say, can't forget this, it was because of all of his efforts after the war that the Convention Against Genocide was ratified by the UN. What I didn't know until I began working for this evening, putting together the panel that we have before us, I didn't know about someone named Dr. Robert Skloot. And the more I learned about him, the more I was amazed that for some reason I had missed the incredible work that he's done on Holocaust and genocide prevention and using theater as a form of communication. And he's written this wonderful play. It's called If the Whole Body Dies, Raphael Lemkin and the Treaty. It's been read around the world.
I want to say thanks to Shirley and to Joe for their wonderful work, and to the Albanian American Civic League for inviting me to address you at this important gathering. I'll use my time judiciously, I assure you. In synagogues throughout the world, the past several weeks on the Sabbath, the Torah readings have dealt with the biblical figure of Joseph. Two of Joseph's qualities that are popularly known are that he was both a dreamer and an interpreter of dreams. This evening, briefly, I want to speak to you about another dreamer and to serve for this occasion as the interpreter of his dream. I'm speaking of Raphael Lemkin, the Polish Jewish refugee to the United States, who in 1944 coined the word genocide and later became the obsessed creative force behind the writing and adoption of the United Nations Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Because Lemkin can't be here with us tonight, he died in 1959, the few minutes I have to speak will be dedicated to telling you just something about this extraordinary world citizen who actually changed the course of history and, equally important, left us the legacy of continuing his work. Born on a farm in northeastern Poland, Lemkin's earliest remembrances included hearing and being upset by the stories of innocent victims of mass violence. In his autobiography, Lemkin writes movingly about his attachment to and concern for historical peoples whose fate was to be marked by annihilation. Those suffering multitudes were never far from his thoughts, while young or as he grew older. Among them, as Shirley mentioned, 49 of his own family were murdered in the Holocaust. Lemkin grew up to become a prominent international lawyer with PhDs in law and linguistics. He spoke 11 and perhaps 14 languages and was a lone figure whose passion to outlaw the slaughter of innocents became the single determining cause of his professional life. For the record, he had no personal life. Lemkin escaped from the early depredations of the invading Nazis by his courage, his wit, and his luck, and made his way through Siberia and Japan to the United States, where he became a professor of law, a member of the United States delegation to the Nuremberg trials, and finally, with his lifelong purpose long decided, took up his unofficial position as the unstoppable human force behind the treaty that became the single foundational document that all discussions of genocide must acknowledge. Lemkin was moved to use his extraordinary intellect and powerful skills of persuasion to compel the devastated post-war world to commit itself to a goal that still eludes us today. He believed with all his wounded heart that in the law could be anchored the definitions, prohibitions, and penalties for engaging in genocide. In doing so, he was unable to remain detached from the nasty minutiae of political conflicts though he hoped that the power and purity of his cause would bring healing and justice to a damaged world. He was wrong on both counts. In the years before his death, that should have been crowned by admiration and regard, his life was despoiled by dire financial distress, importuning, threatening creditors, relentless adversaries, and deteriorating physical and mental health. Together, they took a terrible toll on his finely calibrated sense of rectitude and idealism. In response, Lemkin used the rejection and insult he received to confirm and take courage from his permanent status, which is so common a condition in Jewish culture, the status of an outsider, a Hebrew among Gentiles, an accented immigrant among the native-born, a self-appointed emissary among the officially sanctioned, an aesthete among the Philistines. It was the Canadian politician and academic Michael Ignatieff who identified what I believe to be Lemkin's most important and compelling contribution to the prevention of genocide: his supreme act of moral imagination. That quality of his makes us ask why any one group of people should care for another's welfare. Specifically, and with history providing exterminatory evidence, it is not out of place to ask you, the distinguished company here in this room, what you know and feel about Darfurians, about Bosniaks, about Cambodians and Guatemalans. We know and we justly celebrate tonight what the Albanians felt and did for the Jews 3 generations ago in an earlier time of terror and destruction. The catalog of victims I mentioned testifies to the true importance of Lemkin's treaty, for in it lies the necessary revision of the common wisdom and common practice of caring for our own, if not exclusively, then certainly as a first priority. Lemkin's treaty against genocide, in truth, establishes an entirely new standard for determining, judging, and punishing violence, because it relies on nothing rather than an acknowledged, selfless concern for the humanity of those to whom we owe nothing. Realizing this allows us to recognize how extraordinary was his successful international crusade to get his treaty ratified. But looking back to that date in December 1948, when it was adopted, and our own violence-ridden world today, we must acknowledge the suffering of his, the insufficiency of his extraordinary achievement. Finally, when Lemkin died semi-anonymously, the glass of his singular compelling cause was both half empty and half full. And that is how I will leave Lemkin now, a citizen of the world with a resemblance to us in both his heroic and his deeply flawed nature. His work must become our own, and his word, genocide, must be used when necessary and not avoided in order to make preventing and punishing mass murder a condition that is occurring as I speak to you tonight, making it more, that is to say, stopping that more possible. I concluded the introduction to my play about this great citizen of the world thus. Raphael Lemkin, ingesting heart medication in a cheap Manhattan walk-up, depressed that his adopted country refused to accept his plan to stop genocide, hounded by bill collectors and sustained by a few friends and not a little vanity, was battered by storms internal and outside himself. But in the darkness of another tempest, this one Shakespeare's, I hear, as he must have felt, Miranda's immediate empathic connection when she watched the visitors shipped to her island being battered by the furious waves. And she says, "Oh, I have suffered with those I saw suffer. Oh, the cry did knock against my very heart." Thank you.
You know, I feel Shirley, I think